The CastleVania series has been one of my favorite franchises of video games of all time. Now, I could say that I personally have not played every last one of them in the series, let alone finished them. But everyone knows the deal about the games, from generation to generation. Count Dracula gets resurrected from the dead and then gets defeated again and again. Here we have today is CastleVania Judgment, released on the Nintendo Wii back in November of 2008 by Konami and iTing. I remember way back when a video game store called Game Crazy, who was by the way affiliated with Hollywood Video, had this game on display back in 2008, and I at the time did not have a Wii. But when I got the Wii back in late 2010, I did buy this game a few months later on.
When I personally have seen reviews of this game, I did hear some positives, but to be unfortunately honest with you all, it did receive a lot of flack from sources, a la Gamespot, Game Informer, and G4. Now I can say this verbatim, gaming sources are not always accurate, but in many cases, the biggest issue is the biased views they deliver when it comes to some of the games they review. Now you know, I'm just an independent video game reviewer. I can express my own opinions and views of a game whether I like it or not. I can be a biased douche if I want to, and that depends on if I really like the game at all. Now fast forward to this current day and taking a look back at last generation console gaming with the PS3, Xbox 360, and Wii. I have to give my honest question right here. For fighting game fans and CastleVania fans alike, as well as any other person who may have played this game, isn't it time that we should at least give CastleVania Judgment for the Wii another chance? Well, let's go ahead and see how this game stacks up.
Right on time. Welcome to the Time Rift. Time Rift. Speak sense, man. This is where you'll find what you desire. But first,
This game takes place well beyond the events in every Castlevania game, including the Lords of Shadow games, which at the time this game was released, was probably in its planning stages. Galamoth, who appeared in some various Castlevania games, sends the Time Reaper well into the future, around 10,000 years to be exact, and goes back into the past to rid Count Dracula and change the course of history. Aeon, who never appeared in any previous game of the Castlevania series, pretty much tries to unite every champion, heroes, and villains into a time rift. It is also worth to mention that if you're playing the story mode in this game, every character has his or her own backstory, and just like every fighting game, they have their own opponents and obstacles to face off.
tell me, can your holy art cure my affliction?
Your curse has been with us since ancient times. Nothing can be done. Death is your only salvation.
One amusing thing I can say about this game, and I remembered seeing this on YouTube a while back, is when you play Maria Renard's story, notice when she is about to fight against Shanoa, Sypha, and Carmilla. She talks about their breasts comparing it, considering they're more mature than she is through the mind and body. I'm not kidding you. However, when it comes to her defeating those three, she simply tells them in a nutshell that beauty isn't everything, especially in times of combat.
I may not be sure what's going on, but I'm positive I won't lose.
They say your power surpasses even that of a Belmont. Let us see it then.
Ready?
This is an arcade-style fighting game, and it's time to duke it out as your favorite Castlevania characters, where they all come along together. Time to show off your moves and see who will be the best contender of them all. As I have stated earlier, this game plays much like said games such as Power Stone or Soul Calibur. I can compare it to those two for a few reasons. Number one, in the battle arena, depending on who you're facing, You have a plethora of sub-weapons and other items to acquire, just as it was in every other Castlevania game, to aid your defense against your foes. 2. In some stages, if you corner some of your opponents to the point where they fall off the edge of the ring, obviously that's essential, but that's terribly unoriginal. You can choose the way how you want to play the game in terms of the control styles, whether with the Wii Remote plus Nunchuck, Classic controller, or the Nintendo GameCube controller. To be very honest with you, I would not recommend you play this game with the Wii Remote with Nunchuck. I would probably guess when critics reviewed this game, they were mainly basing the gameplay from there using the Wii Remote with Nunchuck option. I'm not trying to say this to expose their inaccuracies with their reports, but basing from my personal experience, it does get tiresome shaking with the Wii Remote trying to pull off devastating moves. In all fairness and just, I would suggest you use the Wii Classic controller, which I personally don't own, or just a GameCube controller, which are a lot more convenient, and you can pull off finishing moves better. And think about this, if you're using the GameCube controller, it's pretty essential considering that control method worked with Soul Calibur 2 for GameCube, in which I can say Judgment plays quite like it. But anyway, when it comes to playing this game, in the story mode you can play as different characters to see what his or her backstory is about. It is also worth to mention, if you're playing a new game and you're playing it for the first time, you can unlock new characters. Let me also say this, you will hate playing as Golem or Dracula in this game. And why is that? Those two characters, especially Golem, move like slugs and you'd be ready to get your ass handed to you by your opponents. During the story mode of this game, there is a match where you will face a few monsters before the end boss, whether it'll be either an Iron Gladiator or a Minotaur. There is also a castle mode where you would have to meet the conditions in each floor to play throughout until you meet Dracula himself. If you're encountering a boss battle on this floor, you will be at a save floor once you defeat them.
Burn away. Forgive me. This too is fate.
Of course, what will any fighting game be without a multiplayer mode? This game does have a versus mode where you and a friend can play through and see who's the best among you. There is also a mode where you can play online via the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection service, but as of this current day it has been discontinued by Nintendo, and if anything, you'd pretty much have to find people who really like this game to play with you. Now, it is worth to mention, if you have the Nintendo DS game, CastleVania Order of Ecclesia, which unfortunately I do not own, you can unlock Shanoa and Aeon as playable characters. I believe you can also unlock other content and transfer through both of these games anyway. Plus, in Judgment, you can unlock Aeon in every other mode of the game, except for the story mode. Now, one complaint I do have with the game is occasionally some of the moves, depending on what character you have selected, can be a bit unbalanced. However, I can easily overlook that game flaw and just don't worry about screwing up, because you have to take it into consideration. If you lose, that's mainly your problem.
Not enough! You're mine! Not enough!
Your pardon?
Not enough!
Over here.
Let me start out by saying that I really really like the art style and design in this game. For one thing, the art style will somewhat remind you of Soul Calibur, but keep in mind, CastleVania is obviously a completely different world in video games. But the coolest thing I have to say is that the character design is done by Takeshi Obata, who is well known for the manga novel Death Note. I love the opening cutscene after the game is booted up, where it displays every character trying to fight to the top while Aeon is holding the clock with the soul keys. The overall design in this game does a good job, especially combining the Castlevania atmosphere and done by a well-known manga artist. I really love the in-game soundtrack. Depending on what character you play against, the arrangements of select themes from known Castlevania games, such as Vampire Killer if you face against Simon Belmont, or Bloody Tears if you're facing the vampiress Carmilla, are outstanding. As far as the voice acting goes, I could say it's passable, but the worst would come from Alucard's character. The problem with his voice work is why does it sound like he's having an emotional breakdown? In other Castlevania games such as Symphony of the Night, I think his voice work sounded pretty good, but in Judgment, he acts like a teenage boy undergoing manic depression. It's not the worst voice acting I've heard in a video game, but I believe Alucard's voice work could have been better. By the way, it's also up to you that you can change the voices from English to Japanese. So, in an honest perspective, I can say that Castlevania Judgment for Wii is not necessarily a bad game by all means. I felt critics who shot this game down to hell probably went a little overboard and just quickly slapped a bad rating on the game from the get-go. I can honestly say this verbatim. At least the developers behind the game tried to experiment another console-based Castlevania game, and I could say the attempt to make a well-known action game series into a fighting game was probably a leap of faith to give somewhat of variety into the series. Now I could say that it's totally up to you to add this game to your collection. I personally like this game, not just because it's another Castlevania game, but I'm also a big fan of fighting games as well. As of now, this is kidThunder signing off. Take care, stay tuned for future content, and let's defeat Dracula once and for all.
To those who stand in my way, I will show you the might of House Belmont.
Ready? Fight!
Come forth. Come forth. Come forth. Come forth.
Oh,